Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Search Engine Journal webinar. Today, we're going to be joined by Jenny Hallitz, the president of JLH Marketing and also an ambassador for OnCrawl. She's going to be talking about how to unlock your site's hidden potential when it comes to internal linking. Internal linking, that conversation we love to have so much, but is so important. My name is Brent Satoris. I'll be moderating, doing some poll questions and stuff. But Jenny, before we dive in, can you just give us a little bit about yourself, and then I'll do a little bit of housekeeping before we get started.
Sure. Thanks so much for having me on, Brent. I'm really excited to do this webinar. My name, as Brent said, is Jenny Hallitz, and I have been in SEO for about 20 years at this point. And I am sole owner, sole employee of JLH Marketing, which is a consulting agency that specializes in SEO, particularly technical SEO and analytics.
Beautiful. I'm going to dive into a little bit of just some housekeeping stuff for everybody listening. If you have any questions, comments, anything that you want to kind of mention, there is a question box in the bottom of your GoToWebinar screen, and you can type in your questions there. I do encourage you to put in your questions, because at the end of this whole session, at the end of the presentation, we will have a Q&A in which we will have Jill McPherson from OnCrawl joining us with me and Jenny. So we'll both be in there. We'll all three be in there answering your questions. So let's go ahead and get those questions in there throughout the presentation. We'll make sure they get answered. We do have a couple poll questions. This is your opportunity to participate and drive the direction of the information that we are discussing. So if you take a moment when the polls come up and just throw your answers, then it will help us, just better understand what your needs are or where to focus more time on. We're going to make our best effort throughout the entire webinar to link any resources. If Jenny mentions a guide or a tool or something, we're going to try to make sure we get it linked in that box. If we miss it for whatever reason, just let us know and we'll make sure we get it in there later. After the entire webinar is over, please stick around and help us out. We have a really short survey we do at the end of every webinar. I mean, it's really short, no more than 5 minutes, but it definitely helps us a lot to determine how to improve these from week to week. So if you don't mind taking the time, go ahead and throw in the box any feedback you have, like Brent talks too much, he needs to get to the point, and I'll definitely try to learn how to shut up faster. Without any further ado, let's let Jenny dive into this really fun topic today, internal linking. Jenny, take us away.
Thanks so much. So we want to talk about how to unlock your site's hidden potential. And so to begin with, I'm going to show you a picture of a house. For those of you who are not architects, I wanted to mention that this house is what we would call a very modern house. It has lots of different levels. It's not necessarily everything on the same level. There's even that section over there on the left that's kind of hanging out on its own. And you asked me, well, Jenny, what on earth does this have to do with internal linking? I want you to think about your website as the levels of a modern house like this one. You're going to have some things that are kind of off on their own. You're going to have lots of unique levels that may or may not match up with other levels in the house. But ultimately, you can think about every wall that joins every room and every floor as a link. It is a connection within the site. And so what we're talking about today with internal linking, just in case you're not familiar with that term, is the connections between the pages on your website. Now, there are two main types of linking when we talk about SEO. The first one is external linking. Everybody knows, well, I think everybody knows that the links that point to your website are an indication of value to a search engine. They want links that indicate that the site is of high quality, that it's trustworthy, that it's authoritative. When we talk about internal linking, we're talking about creating those same signals within the website. So you want your house or your website to look like this, not like this. This photo or this artist rendering of the burrow from Harry Potter even says in the book that it looked as though it were held up by magic. And some of us have websites that are like that, right? They're kind of stuck together with duct tape and chewing gum. Working on internal linking is a great way to fix that problem and make a better website. Structure and architecture is so important. And just a couple weeks ago, Dawn Anderson, who is a foremost authority on information retrieval, said she had a dev team that told her that they didn't want to include the main category pages of the site in the XML sitemap because they're not important enough. And I took this analogy of a house to a whole new level, even for me. And that is, you would not yank out the flooring of the second story of a building just because the ceiling of the level below served a similar purpose. So don't do that with your website either. Category and structure are super important. So at this point, now that I've given you a little bit of background on what internal linking is, I'd love to know how often you check or audit internal links.
Beautiful. So we have our first poll up there. How often do you check or audit internal links? I've never audited internal links before. Once is usually enough for me. Every quarter, at least once a month, and I'm always working on internal links. Again, I'll give everybody a couple of seconds to kind of get some votes in. We have a couple really close results, so I want to give you guys a couple more seconds to see if we can break some of these close ties. So just bear with us. Again, how often do you check or audit your internal links? All right, I'm going to go ahead and close this out, and I'll share the results with everyone. Yeah, I've never audited my internal links, and then every quarter seems to be at least half the group in those two areas. Pretty interesting. Not super surprising though, to be honest.
No, it's not super surprising. It's one of those things that if you're not actively thinking about internal links, then you might be thinking about it more as navigation. So let's talk about that a little bit. When we evaluate internal value, we do it on this scale of 0 to 10. This is just kind of a holdover from the days of PageRank. And by the way, if you want some more background on internal linking, Dixon Jones did a great presentation at Brighton in 2019, which is linked there. But when we talk about navigation and components of this internal link power, we're talking about three main areas: click depth, URL, structure, and taxonomy. I want to give a quick shout out to Kevin Indig here because he has a model called the TIPR model that talks about how incoming links influence the power of internal links. And so just keep that in mind as we're going through this, because I'm a big believer in that. And I'm going to come back to that a little bit later. But when we're talking about these components of internal link power, taxonomy is made up of three main parts. Two of those are governance and logistics. Search engines do not care about those. What they care about are the keywords that you actually use to describe your items. Now, you may be stuck doing a particular taxonomy based on something like how the shipping group is set up, where your information is stored, or how your fulfillment warehouse works. All of these things could be impacts on governance and logistics from the taxonomy side of things. But what you need to do is make sure that you choose the right keywords to refer to these things, because that's going to become important in your internal link structure. The other component of internal link power is URL structure, and that's canonicals and nofollow. Those are really mostly for controlling crawl. Again, search engines care about them for that reason, but not so much in terms of how your link power actually works. These are just kind of roadblocks that sometimes get in the way, and we use canonicals and nofollow to fix those roadblocks. And then click depth is the other thing. And there's that old adage that every page needs to be no more than 3 clicks from the home page. That is nonsense. You heard it here first, folks. I think it is total nonsense. Links only matter as to the depth from the previous link and the anchor text that's on that link. And when I say anchor text, I'm going back to the keywords in the taxonomy. If you've got a navigation structure that uses the wrong keywords, then your anchor text is probably going to use the wrong keywords. So that's where that comes into play. This is why things like mega menus are so problematic. Now, there are huge sites, eBay, Amazon, that use mega menus very effectively. Home Depot has a huge menu. I'm not saying that you can't do a mega menu. What I'm saying is that it needs to be in balance. So if you are linking to every page of every part of your site in the navigation, then you are linking to every page from every page, which essentially tells Google, hey, none of these pages are important. You ever heard the saying that if you give people too many decisions, then they will not make any decision? It's kind of like that with our websites as well. And so you could see when we look at this uneven value structure that the crawl depth is mostly centered at level 2. Now, that can be a problem. If you've got a situation where every page is linking to every other page, no page is important. There are also very few valuable keywords used here. Because the client is, well, it wasn't my client, it was one of my client's competitors, but because the site uses injury, personal lawyer, personal attorney, Los Angeles, because that's where they're located, like they use that on every single page, and they use that in so many of their links that it creates, again, this word cloud where there's nowhere to focus. So if you need a personal injury attorney for a car accident, it's going to be hard to find in this site because every page on the site is apparently about personal injury lawyer and the law offices in Los Angeles. It's not helpful. Another way this fails is if you have a template that uses repetitive linking. This is an example of a site where it identifies file extensions, and it's a useful thing because who hasn't had a file extension that they've gone, what the heck does this mean? You want to do a quick search for it and find out, what the file extension is, who created it, how can I use it, etc., right? But when you have something where they're all created by the same creator or developer, in this case, Adobe Systems Incorporated, and you're linking to that page dozens of times within dozens of pages, you create a situation where there's just so much noise in the template through this repetitive linking that it's hard, again, for the search engines to understand what's important. So this is an example of something where the site could probably just make a change in the template so that that last column of file type creator developer isn't linked, and probably see only good things come as a result of it. So what is the biggest internal linking challenge that you face? Now, I know you guys don't audit them all the time, but I'm betting that you still face some of these issues. So let's see what you have to say.
Let's see, we got A, finding time, resources to work on them. B, knowing how to identify opportunities. C, understanding how internal links help SERP rankings. D, dealing with links and templates, header, footer, and sidebar. Or E, other. Again, what's the biggest challenge you face in terms of internal linking structure? And we'll give everybody a chance to get a vote in. We're getting pretty close to already having almost the majority of people voted. So we'll give you just another second or two. All right, let's share the results. And it's B, knowing how to identify opportunities. Very interesting, but it makes sense, right? I mean, if you knew all your opportunities, you'd link them and you'd monitor them and you'd be done. So that's not super surprising either, but definitely interesting to know.
Well, that's great for me to know because that's the whole point of this presentation.
Exactly.
So let me show you how to identify some of these opportunities. We talked about site structure a lot so far, and you might be asking yourself, should I change my site structure to be less flat? The answer is ideally yes. You want to have a good architecture, a clear navigation, but let's be realistic here. You can't go back to your boss and say, hey, we need to completely redesign our site today because Jenny Hallis told us we do. No, that's not going to fly. So there are things you can do in the meantime, and I wanted to show you an example. So this is an example of a site that has a really flat architecture. And this is one of my clients. They do third-party fulfillment services for companies that are doing e-commerce. When we broke down all the sections of the site and we looked at the average in rank by depth, and this is one of the tools in OnCrawl that I absolutely love. This is sponsored by OnCrawl, and I'm an ambassador, so expect to see more from them. But looking at the average in rank by depth, you can see the site is very flat. Everything is at level 2 and 3, not much of anything else. But the internal linking really compensates for that, because as you can see, all of those colored lines are connections between these different sections of the site. When I first started working with this client, I said, okay, we've definitely got some internal linking work to do, but I want to point out that this fulfillment category, especially this 23.95% of your site, of your links. And so we want to break that out some more, because fulfillment is definitely what you do, but it's not necessarily relevant to every single page. So we worked on it and we made some changes. And as you can see, over, I think it took us about 4 or 5 months to get all of this implemented. But as you can see, we've really made some changes here. Now, some of that came down to just categorizing things a little bit differently, but most of it came down to really adjusting the navigation, but the primary and secondary navigation on the site to be more directed. And so to show those side by side, the one on the left is what it was like 4 to 6 months ago, and the one on the right is what it's like today. You can see we've really brought that fulfillment value down. So it's 14% now. And then we've added a lot of other sections and tried to really divide the site up in a much more advantageous way. So this client, at the beginning of the coronavirus event, the pandemic, they said to me, we really need to perform better on keywords like alternative to Amazon FBA. If you're not familiar with that, it's fulfillment by Amazon. It's repetitive, but it's what people search. And the reason they wanted to do better on that keyword is because when the pandemic first started, Amazon was prioritizing essential products, essential services, things like masks and hand sanitizer. And so the companies that didn't provide any of those essential services were experiencing a lot of problems with delivery, and a lot of them were looking for alternatives. So we went and looked, and believe it or not, you can use internal linking to rank better for keywords that you want to rank for. We looked at the ideal traffic patterns in Google Analytics, through OnCrawl. If you're looking at the average in rank, this is kind of what an ideal traffic pattern looks like. So you have most of your sessions coming from pages that have or coming to pages that have really good in rank. When we looked at this Amazon area of the site, fulfillment by Amazon, we found that we were not looking at an ideal traffic pattern. So clicking into it, you could see what the URLs are that go into that in rank and where the big opportunities and failures are. By doing this, we were able to see that the client had this Amazon fulfillment alternative page, has a great in rank, really worked hard in the site, but not getting a lot of traffic from search. And the reason it wasn't getting a lot of traffic from search is because we had this "Is Amazon FBA right for your business" page that was competing for that keyword. So what we did instead was consolidated the pages together, added a link to the how to sell page, used that in rank that was already on the Amazon fulfillment alternative page to really optimize for the Amazon FBA keyword, and saw a great result. Another thing you might look at is when you're looking at that and you see that your top group of pages for traffic don't have the highest link power, well, why would that be? And this is, again, a not ideal layout of in-rank. We see that one of these really low in-rank sections is getting the majority of the sessions from Google. Well, why would that be? We were missing an opportunity. So when we looked at it, we realized that there was a page that had really great in-rank, and it had a bunch of inbound links to it. So going back to that link power idea that Kevin talks about, that Kevin Indig talks about, the inbound links really have a lot of impact on how your internal link structure works as well. And when you have your top inlink anchors are things that were used in, say, a featured post, we can see we've got some really great links pointing to this page, but we were seeing a really poor in rank for this page. So by connecting this page better to the rest of the site, in this case, we actually made it one of the primary resources in the resource section, then we saw a really big improvement in the in rank of that page, and then also saw that everything started to balance out in terms of how that in rank works with the SEO sessions. So really cool example of using an opportunity with in rank to improve how that page is performing. And then you can do so much troubleshooting with internal linking. If you are looking at reports like status code breakdowns, you can see where there are major value cutoffs happening. In this case, we had a situation where this is a hospital site, and because so much of the site is behind a login barrier, the homepage had something like 90% of the links we're going to a 403, which was requiring a login. When you do that and you cut off the value to all of the other sections of the site, then you create a situation where the search engine really doesn't have anywhere to go, and they don't have any way to understand what the value is based on what's on the homepage. Pediatric treatments was another section that we saw just really big issues there. So by digging into it, you can really improve how your in rank works just by fixing up those status codes a little bit. Oops, sorry about that. You could also see too many links to the wrong place. So again, when we looked at this same breakdown, and instead of looking at it by status codes, we looked at it by indexability, you can also see that there are an awful lot of non-indexable pages that are coming from all of these sections. And by restructuring things a little bit, we could probably see a really good improvement in how the site is viewed in search. And then don't ignore critical pages. In this case, we looked at page groups by depth and found that the Find Doctors Physicians, there were a whole lot of pages here that were really deep. And those are critical pages to success, because when people go to a hospital website, they're not searching for, unless they're looking for the ER, they're not searching for blog posts about things. They're looking for this particular physician that my friend told me I should go and talk to. And so if we look at pages that aren't getting enough link power, this can be a great way. At depth 11, we see that there's a doctor, Dr. West, who is only who only has 5 in links at a depth of 11. Something is not right here. And this is one of the best doctors in internal medicine. She's got like a 4.9 in Google reviews. So what we did was we looked and checked the internal medicine treatment page, because if she was on that page, she should have had dozens of in links, not just 5. And lo and behold, we found a template failure. Found a situation where she was left off because her name starts with W. And by looking at that, we were able to identify a whole bunch of other doctors that were getting left off because the template was only showing like the first 5 doctors in alphabetical order. It's crazy, some of the things that you find that you go, oh, I'm not sure I ever would have even noticed that unless I was looking at internal link power. Locate technical issues. As we talked about before, there are pages that aren't getting any traffic on your site. I love, love, love this report from OnCrawl that shows the SEO active pages by depth, because what this does is it links up to your Search Console and it identifies pages within your structure that aren't getting any clicks from Search Console, from Google search. And that's great to know, because it can really identify things that either aren't working or aren't being seen, or you know, you might get the page indexed, but if you're not getting any traffic from it, does anybody really care? So really great way to identify things. And if you filter this to what really matters, like by indexable pages, you can really get some fun information. So I'm gonna blow this up so you could see. So this was that, going back to that same fulfillment site, we had a bunch of things that weren't getting any traffic. Okay, well, one of these is kind of duplicate content that we need to deal with. A couple of them are brand new, so we're not really expecting traffic to them yet. And one of them is really unimportant terms and conditions. You know, we only expect Google to be sending traffic to that page. But then here's an opportunity. An old post, 5 ways your fulfillment center can make your holidays merry, not getting any Google traffic, has some in-rank, so it is actually part of the overall structure, but it's not getting any traffic. We took a look at it, saw that it was a situation where it's an older post. It needed to be updated for 2020. We're working on it right now, and we're hoping we'll see some really good dividends as a result. Very easy way to identify things that just are underperforming, that maybe have the opportunity to be updated and improved. And then enjoy your success, because if you take these strategies and go in and dig into your internal links and look at how things are performing, you are definitely going to see success. And in this case, this client absolutely saw success. I mean, 20% increase in indexable canonical pages and overall pages in the structure, 82% increase in SEO sessions. I know that doesn't, you know, that could be a lot or it could be a little. You're going to have to trust me when I say that it was actually about 3,000 sessions a month for a site that, you know, was not getting a ton of traffic before. So really some good things happening here. And then you can also see it really play out in Google Organic. One of the things that I love best about internal linking and internal link optimization is that it's incremental and it builds on itself. So once you implement those changes, you are going to see growth, and it's going to continue to grow year over year, month over month, week over week. And it also can really help you identify when things go wrong with core updates. You can go back and you can look at those internal links, and you can absolutely see which pages get impacted because they're getting no traffic, or because they have no good in rank, or any other issues like that. By attacking those ahead of time, then when those core updates roll, you've got much less chance of getting hit by them. So really look at all the opportunities that you have to implement changes, and you can use internal linking as just a stepping stone to get in there and start finding out what's going on. So if you take nothing else away today, Future-proof your core updates, find your opportunities, and troubleshoot. Troubleshoot, troubleshoot, troubleshoot. And ultimately, it's definitely going to improve your performance. If you want more on internal linking, OnCrawl has a great ebook that you can download here, and we'll put that link in the chat. And then because you attended this wonderful webinar with me, at least I hope you thought it was wonderful, you can enjoy a 1-month free trial on me. We'll put that link in the chat as well. And thank you so much. I'd like to pass it back over to open up for questions.
Beautiful. Thanks, Jenny. Really, really great presentation. I have just a ton of questions that have rolled in, which is not too surprising. This is one of those fields where, as you know, Jenny, for years, there's been what people think works, and then what works, and then what used to work and doesn't work anymore. And there's not a lot of opportunity to kind of define and scope that down to what's currently relevant, which is what's really great about this presentation, because it's an opportunity to do that. And through Q&A, based on the questions I have, I think we're going to have a lot more opportunities to kind of really set a couple, misunderstandings or a couple best practices really straight through that. So the first question I have, I think it's a pretty simple one for me and you to kind of deal with, but should we link out to our social media accounts since they slow the page and they take link juice? So I think there's two parts to that, social media from the sense that they're slowing down your page, and also the link juice, which, yeah. What do you think, Jenny?
Yeah, I'm not a big believer in like link juice or that we have a specific amount of link value for every page or anything like that. So I definitely don't think that you're losing link juice per se by linking out to your social platforms. And ultimately, I think that if you can really build a good social presence for your brand, you're going to find that that's going to pay off in spades. So if you don't link out to your social channels, I would suggest that you do. But a couple things on that. The links themselves don't delay the load time of your site. That's absolutely not even an issue. If you're using an applet or a share this or something like that to link to social, then the JavaScript that runs that might slow down your site a little bit. But for the most part, like and absolutely a link, just a regular link pointing out, is not going to slow down your site. There is something else that I want to point out there, and that is that there are plugins for site pages, and there's one in particular that I've run into over and over and over again, and that's an Instagram plugin that uses full resolution photos in miniature in like a little grid on your site. And man, that thing just slows down the site to a crawl. So definitely test those plugins and make sure that they're not causing the problem. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, both parts I would reiterate the exact same thing. There's no reason it should slow your site down unless you're using some random plugin, in which case you should switch to just links. And then link juice, yeah, whatever. That just is not a thing anymore. I mean, not in the sense that anyone is really going to benefit from it unless you're crazy, crazy good and big and willing to break some rules. Do these taxonomy keywords need to be exact match ones?
No, absolutely not. Exact match has gone the way of the dodo.
Yeah.
The keywords that you use on your site, you want to be helpful, informative, descriptive, but they don't like FBA for Amazon, for example. Like the client wanted to rank better for alternative to Amazon FBA, which if we wrote that out, it would be alternative to Amazon fulfillment by Amazon. Like, that doesn't make any sense in an actual sentence. So we wouldn't use that. And we wouldn't use it in link anchor text either, because it just doesn't make sense. So yeah, that's a really long-winded way of saying no. I don't think the exact match matters at all.
Yeah, and if you're not familiar and you don't track like all the updates, there's a big kind of conceptual update called Burt that came out recently, which really was kind of the nail in the coffin of this whole exact match kind of debate. And that's just that, you know, exact match was actually causing issues in search results. And so they had to change the basically the way they looked at, you know, search queries and results to eliminate kind of the problem that some exact match coding was causing in search. So they've actually gotten away from that in conceptual aspects as well. Can you
Yeah, I mean,
explain? Go ahead, Jenny. Sorry.
I was just going to add, Burt is a form of machine learning technology, and ultimately the search engines are all trying to better understand the context of a website as opposed to using an exact keyword to determine what the website's about.
And if you want to know more about Burt, Dawn Anderson, who we talked about earlier, has a video on it. She actually did a full podcast. I mean, not a podcast, a webinar once, and it's on our YouTube channel. The SCJ YouTube channel has a full video on Burt, and that's all the conceptual stuff. Like, why does it even exist, and why would you even care about it, and what does it matter? You know.
Yeah,
But
that's a
yeah.
fantastic one.
Can you explain more how click depth only matters from the previous page to the link it came from? Let's consolidate a couple of these. I've got questions in here about like, you know, do you really need to be, you know, don't your most important pages need to be the lowest clicks from your main page? There's some questions about the benefits to, you know, link sculpting, you know, and being able to flow it. There's some questions as to how does authority. So maybe what we can do is let's talk a little bit about how does authority transfer? Why is a link, you know, in an SEO even something we discuss? I think there's a lot of questions kind of misunderstanding or wanting to better understand why authority passes. And then let's discuss a little bit about the whole concept of how many clicks away from a site and why that would be a discussion. I think that will explain just a lot about authority flow, and I think that will answer a lot of these questions.
Yeah, definitely. So that's something that I was kind of trying to get at with the house analogy at the beginning, and that is that if you think about a house, you have your front door. People can come in the front door, but they can also come in the back door and the sliding glass door and the garage door, and they could crawl through a window if they really wanted to. So there's all these different ways to get into your site. And while the homepage is, you know, kind of our hey, here we are, this is who we are, this is what we're about type of page, it, ever since the advent of search engines and the ability to come directly to a page within a site that has the information that we need, the homepage is not necessarily the most important page on the site anymore. So if somebody does a search and they're searching for some random thing within, let's just say you're searching for an iPhone case within Amazon. Amazon is not going to take you to the homepage of their site and have you filter down through the, you know, phone accessories and cases and iPhone 5, and, you know, like it's not going to send you through all of that. It's going to take you directly where you need to go. And so when we talk about authority being spread throughout a site, we're talking about, and the whole concept of the click depth really only matters as to the distance from the previous link. What I'm getting at here is that a site can be authoritative for a lot of different things. And if the New York Times links to Amazon's page on iPhone cases for the what are we at now? The 20? I don't even know. I'm an Android girl. If they link to that, then they're saying Amazon is an authority for this topic. They're not saying anything about Amazon's authority for digital cameras. So it really becomes important from the standpoint of of what's the topic and how authoritative is that link for that topic. Does that?
Yeah, yeah. And then the one other thing I would throw in there that I always like to use as an example is you have to remember why all these things exist, right? We took a real world environment and Google tried to mirror it. So if you look at like SEO on page tactics, they follow like the structure of how to write an article, right? You have titles, headers, things, and they're all supposed to function in the way they're supposed to function. Well, recommendations are links, right? In the real world, you say, I'm looking for a belt, go to Walmart, right? But you're not going to go to Walmart, stand outside and say, I'm here, and then walk away. You still have to go inside and you're going to look for a section of the area that says men's. And then you're going to go over there and you're going to look for the little sign that says belts. And you're going to go over and look at all the belts. And then you're going to see the prices. And so this is internal linking, right? You're saying, hey, from a big picture standpoint, you want to go to Walmart. And from another standpoint, you don't just want to go there and that's it. You want to actually go to the men's section. So the idea is like, where do you have to bring people into this? But a lot of times Walmart will have 4 or 5 different sections. You have a grocery section, you have other sections which are equally important, right? And so that's where you start to see what Jenny's saying with the priorities in there. You can see where it starts driving people to different areas, right? So authorities are just recommendations, right? I mean, links are just recommendations, and the authority passes based on whether or not you're getting a recommendation for a meal to eat and it comes from a chef or it comes from a buddy has no idea how to cook, right? You're going to look at one and say, wow, that's much more authoritative. And that's where authority levels come into play. And if you think about all of that in the scope of what Jenny's talking about, then you start to understand where it flows and how it flows and why it flows. And that can help a lot.
And I also ascribe to a model called the reasonable surfer model. And that gets to when we talk about controlling link value, like the old concept of PageRank sculpting, which really does not work. And I don't want anybody to go and try to do this, but like the idea that, you've got certain things like the terms and conditions and the privacy policy that are in the footer of every page. Well, they're in the footer and Google knows that they're in the footer. So the reasonable surfer model would say that the links to those pages being in the footer are not as important as a link that's in the main content.
Beautiful. What's your approach to building an internal link graph when it's for a site that has millions of pages?
I actually don't build it. I use OnCrawl.
Yeah, there you go, right? Yeah, and I would say that's really the answer is that once you get beyond a certain scope, you really shouldn't be trying to manually, build these out or really conceive them. You really want to start looking for tools that will help you to kind of at least get you on the right track. And then all you're doing is making, decisions down that path. Does OnCrawl have like a feature that allows that internal link graph to be built, or is it just have reports that allow you to build it yourself?
So it's both. OnCrawl has a couple of different ways you can do it. There's a segmentation feature where you can segment the site based on what's important to you, or based on the URL structure, or based on a random structure that you come up with yourself, and then import via JSON. They have the ability to do what's called data ingestion, where you can take data from something like BigCommerce or Salesforce or anything like that and input it into the system and get reports based on that. And then there's just kind of the standard that goes on the file structure of the site. So there's a
Perfect.
default, and then there's a million ways to customize it.
And I just want to take a moment to let everybody who's listening know that like I have over 100 questions piling up. So this is not like a small amount of questions. So I'm trying to like consolidate some of them, but a lot of these questions are very unique. And so if we don't have time to get through them all, I'm gonna beg Jenny to take a little extra time today and tomorrow, and we'll send these all over to her and see if she can write responses back to them that we can include in the recap post that we put on the site next week. Just know that I'm not trying to ignore you. I just literally have hundreds of questions in here. So, definitely we'll make sure that we get these over to Jenny and we'll get them all answered. But we'll try to get through as many as we can.
I love that. And I've also got up on the screen 3 different ways to contact me,
Yeah, there you
so
go.
feel free.
What UTM parameters in internal links, does that affect the performance from an SEO perspective? Go for it, Jenny.
Oof. Don't use UTM parameters in internal links. Don't do
Yeah,
it.
there you go.
Yes, you can use them if you have no other option or alternative, but use canonical to control them so that you are not creating multiple copies of the same URL. That creates such big problems for Google.
But I don't even
And
understand why you'd use UTM anymore for internal
I,
links
I mean, I
anyway. I
think
mean, I
it's
don't know
kind of
what
the
the
poor
purpose.
man's link. I don't mean poor man. That's dismissive. It's kind of the alternative to using some kind of click tracking technology.
But
Um,
doesn't Google Analytics at this point have the layers and tags enough? I mean, you should use Tag Manager and use the layers through Tag Manager, and you would get all the information without having to use any of the UTM parameters.
yeah, exactly.
So you might look at that. Whoever asked that question, you might look at like do a little research into Google Tag Manager and layers, and you can get really, really specific in there without having to mess, with some of these. And you can do some Google's searches. You can like search. People do presentations all the time about like different layers they came up with, and you can do a ton of stuff with that. It can be super beneficial. So.
I'm going to give a big old shout out to Annie Cushing right now.
Oh yeah, of
Her
course.
site is Analytics, like analytics, but Annie.com, and she has everything you could ever want to know on these topics.
She is a wealth of information. I have bought almost all of her templates over the years. And I need to do an audit or I need to do something. She has some of the best templates. So definitely a big shout out to her as well.
When it
How do
comes
you,
to analytics, like
yeah,
and figuring out how to track something, she's just one of the best.
how do you feel about URL fragments? Are we better off creating separate pages instead?
Ooh, okay. So there are URL fragments officially are a JavaScript construct caused by use of Ajax. And if you're using like the hashbang symbol, which some people would think of as like a number symbol or a pound symbol in a URL, Google is not going to crawl past that hash. So those are not good. Using URL fragments for pages that you really need that post render content to be indexed.
But hone in on that sentence. Google will not read past the hashtag right there. So it's important to note that.
Yeah, that's official. I mean, that was just confirmed. I think a couple of weeks ago on a Google Webmaster Hangout. There are ways to use Ajax effectively, lots of ways to use Ajax effectively, and it's a terrific technology. But that hashbang in the URL is a problem. The search engines just are not equipped to identify the content that you mean with that hashbang.
So this is an interesting question. I'm going to try to summarize it down and say that, like, look, links on a page have different value at different places, right? We know that footer links don't have as much value, but how do links? Do you feel or do you know of a difference in value when the link is placed in a list versus within the context of a paragraph? Like if somebody puts bullet points and then a link, does it lower the value than if it was actually in the construct of a paragraph? I don't personally know. Like I've never thought about it that refined. It's normally the number of links on a page and how relevant they are and just all kinds of other factors. But I'm curious if you have a view on that.
Well, I want to be really clear that we've entered the realm of conjecture here. And I wouldn't even necessarily say that Google definitely does value main content links over footer links, for example. I think that the reasonable surfer model implies that. And then I also think that the reasonable surfer model implies that if the link is useful to the context and the content of the page, then it probably doesn't matter whether it's in a bullet point or a list or an image with alt text. Yeah, I'm sure there've been some studies done on that. Like I'm part of the SIA, I think that's called SIA Institute, which is a group that does a lot of testing. But it's still
Honestly,
like any kind of test that you do is gonna be is gonna have so many things that you can't control that you
what I
can
will
only
what I will say,
guess.
Jenny, is people have done these, tests with much stronger signals for years, and Google just simply says that's not true. It doesn't matter. It's all coincidence. When you have 300 plus factors, that all different weights can affect your ranking, and then you go into something that's so minute of a factor, nestled under so many other factors, you would never be able to truly define this. So I guess the answer is your guess is as good as ours when it comes
Pretty
down to it.
much. I mean, I would say do what's best for your users, and it's probably going to be fine. I know that's
What
a
I
bit of a
normally say,
cop out, but
well, I normally say there's better places to spend your time. If you get down to a point
yeah.
where you're trying to move the needle 0.0000001%, like you would be better off focusing on just doing some bigger like survey type or bigger white paper type content, or creating some really evergreen things, or creating something that's so unique that everybody has to link to you, would be a better use of your time than really trying to figure that out. So just again, what Jenny said, do what's best for your customers. That doesn't seem to hurt you these days. It seems to be the guiding force, right? Between eat and everything else, it's like do what's best for your customers, and you're gonna, come out on top.
Well, and I don't think it's a these days thing either. I think it's kind of always been that way.
Well,
Um,
I had some friends that were able to play with that system quite a bit back in the
well,
day.
sure, the technology certainly improved.
Currently, this individual is overhauling their site's top level navigation. They want to know if where we're streamlining the navigation. They want to know, is it possible or a good idea to streamline the navigation bar, then update internal links elsewhere, i.e., on the on-page components of other pages, right? Like maybe in the footer or in the sidebar elsewhere. For what it's worth, the site currently seems to be siloed into sections, but then has everything linking to everything within those sections.
Yeah, yeah. I would say it depends on how much supplemental content you have that is not getting linked from every page on the footer. Think about balance. So if you have 50 categories that are all being linked in the header, the main nav, or the footer, like anywhere on the page that it's every single page, then you better have at least double that amount of additional content that's not linked, because you have to give some indication of value.
Quick
So
question here. Oh, sorry.
I'm a big fan of secondary navigation. So if you have really disparate categories, then link all your primary categories in your main nav, but then have a secondary navigation within those sections that's only for that section. Every time usability and library science supports a structure like that. So I see no reason why we wouldn't want to do it on our websites.
Awesome. Quick question here. Short answer preferred is what they put right from the start. So,
Jenny, don't blather on for 15
I don't
minutes.
know. I mean, I'm just saying that's the actual question. Short answer preferred. How is OnCrawl different than a tool like Screaming Frog?
Okay.
I guess
Very
they're thinking
simple.
like the focus, right? We always say there's focus. Like, oh, Screaming Frogs is, this. Ahrefs is for links and SEMrush is for content. And, everybody's got their kind of like shining star. So I guess that's what they're looking for.
Yeah. I'm one word, enterprise. OnCrawl can handle enterprise level sites, the volume of pages of an enterprise site. And Screaming Frog's awesome and I love it, but it starts to choke at about 300,000 pages.
Beautiful. How would you suggest to unflatten a site with a very niche keyword target? You have a very niche target, right? You maybe you're going over certain types of loans, or you do certain types of very specific law or medicine, or really provide something that's niche, but you want to kind of unflatten your site. Do you let the SEO dictate you and go in that direction, or if you're really flat, do you just stay flat?
If you're really flat, just stay flat. Use your internal linking to try to improve and elevate the things that you think are more important. I'm working with a client right now that does securities exams for financial services, and it's pretty flat because it's all the different exams, and then within each exam we have a study guide and we have free practice questions. So there's really not much more you can do with that. But just by structuring it in a tree, it works.
So you used the word in rank a lot when you were talking earlier, and some people asked, what is in rank?
That is OnCrawl's branded term. And I think I'm going to let Jill really explain what in rank is.
She might have to unmute. She's still there?
Hi, yep, can you hear me?
Yep. Yes, we can.
Yeah, so InRank is basically OnCrawl's algorithm similar to PageRank. So basically what it does is it's a score that's based on a scale of 0 to 10 that helps you understand how popular your pages are and the probability that a user would visit each page. So it allows you to track different changes in rank at different depths of your website. So whether that's for all pages or for different page groups. And as you saw on Jenny's presentation there, you can see how in rank will flow using the flow graph that she showed. So for how is it scored, and sorry, just let me know if I'm talking too fast because I want to make this quick, as I know we're running out of time. Okay, perfect. So basically for each crawl, OnCrawl will calculate the in rank of each page it encounters. So it just starts by looking at the internal links and calculates the probability of the page. Then there's a dampening factor applied, and they adjust the score to fit on from 0 to 10, which is what you would have seen. And so it doesn't include external links. It doesn't include no follows. It's just the follow links that you see. And obviously we know, as we saw, that it's super important. It's best to use it evaluating the entire website. So you just want to make sure that all of your URLs in a full crawl is done. And it just helps you really understand the impact of your internal linking strategy on your site.
Beautiful. Very good. So, Jenny, we have a lot more questions in here and we are pretty much out of time. I mean, there's a lot of things people are asking that are really good questions. I think that if you're willing to, we'd love to send you all these questions over and see if you can kind of, go through and answer some of them. I think we'll have like an entire freaking 4 or 5 articles after this, but definitely shows a lot, the interest level in this topic. So I promise you, everyone, we're going to send all these questions. I'm going to have Delisa send all these questions over to Jenny. We're going to ask her if she can, kind of get through and get us some answers back on these, and we'll get these up on the blog post, which I believe comes out every Monday. Don't hold me to it because there's always a chance it's going to come out on Tuesday and then I'll be wrong, but almost always it's on Monday that these come out. So we will definitely get all these questions over. We will, sorry, I'm being told Tuesday. is actually the day. See, there you go. So much I know. So Tuesday, the post should be coming out. We will have all these questions answered, hopefully, there for you. Yeah, and so Jenny, thank you so much for the presentation. I feel like this is a really, fun and interesting topic that kind of gets glossed over a lot. And so I think it's really great to kind of focus on it. And I think you had some really good information in there. So I want to thank you for sharing. And I want to thank, OnCrawl for letting you come in and present with, with their brand as a part of their combination. And I think it's really cool that they're willing to give the free month. I mean, it's a really amazing tool. So I hope everybody takes advantage of that. And I want to thank, Jill for coming on. Jill, sorry, some of these topics didn't really touch too much on OnCrawl, but I was really happy you were able to get in there and answer the one question. I don't think either one of us could have even touched on answering that question the way you did.
Oh, so, thank you so much.
This.
Thank you again, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Jill. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.